Today I'm going to be teaching you how to make the best chocolate chip pumpkin cookies. I made these for Christmas one year and they were so good that Kris Kringle himself asked me to make this video so he could have these cookies at more people's houses. The first step is to preheat the oven. In order to make these cookies perfect, you should set your oven to 350 degrees. Ensure you have all the ingredients. I will go over everything you need throughout this video. The next step is to mix the dry ingredients together in a medium-sized bowl. First, you add 2 cups of flour. When you measure flour for baking, it's important to scoop the flour into a measuring cup and then level it off with the back end of a knife so that the measurements are accurate. Baking is a science, so accurate measurements are very important for some ingredients, mainly flour. After that, we're going to add our leavening ingredients. Leavening ingredients are ingredients that you add to baked goods to help them rise and hold their shape. For these cookies, that will be 2 teaspoons of baking powder and a 3/4 teaspoon of baking soda. The reason pumpkin-flavored things are so good in the fall is mainly due to the spices that go along with it. So in order to bring out that delicious pumpkin flavor in these cookies, it's important to add a lot of spices to your batter. Now, I did not want to go out and buy a ton of different spices, so I kept it simple and added only pumpkin pie spice, ground ginger, and cinnamon. Because I'm from the South, my philosophy when it comes to seasoning things is to measure with your heart. So that's what I did to spice these cookies. I continuously went on and added spices until I thought it would be good. Next is to add salt. Adding salt to any sweet thing that you might bake is pretty important in order to balance out the sweetness of the baked good. We're going to be adding 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Finally, whisk all of that together. At this stage, your mixture should smell strongly of the spices we added before. If you feel that it might not have been enough, you should definitely add more. I felt that it wasn't strong enough and continued to add even more spices, especially ginger, because personally that is a flavor that I really enjoy. The one thing I would have done differently making these again would have been to add more spices, so don't be afraid of overdoing it. Set that aside so we can begin to mix together our wet ingredients. We will start with creaming together the fats and sugars. You'll need 1/2 cup of granulated sugar, 1/2 cup brown sugar, and 1/2 cup of a neutral flavored oil. I chose to use avocado oil. My video stopped recording when I was measuring out my brown sugar, but it's important to note that when you measure out brown sugar, you always want to pack it in the measuring cup, the same way you might pack sand into a mold for a sandcastle. I do that by pressing it to the side of the bag it comes in. Mix those ingredients as much as you can. Once your fat and sugar mixture looks like this, you'll add 1 large egg and approximately 1 teaspoon of vanilla. This is another one of those things though that I don't typically measure out with a measuring spoon, but you definitely can. You'll mix those together and it should end up looking really creamy and smooth. Finally, add the star ingredient, 1 cup of canned pumpkin puree. I will warn you though that it is slightly annoying to get from the can into the measuring cup, but it is 100% worth it. You're going to want to make sure these wet ingredients are fully combined so they don't have clumps of anything in your cookies whenever they're done. In an ideal kitchen, I would have mixed this part in a stand mixer with the paddle attachment. However, I'm in a poorly stocked college kitchen, so I didn't have access to one of those right now. In order to make sure that it didn't have any clumps, I had to switch over to a whisk so that I could get it fully combined. After all of the wet ingredients are combined, begin slowly incorporating the flour mixture until it is almost fully combined. You will do this by adding little bits of the flour mixture and folding it into the wet ingredients with a rubber spatula. This might take a minute, especially if you're like me and missing a stand mixer. If that's the case, your arms will definitely be burning after this. You can see me in the video switch arms while mixing and stretch out my hands and everything, but keep going because it will definitely be worth it. I decided that I didn't only want chocolate chips, but I also wanted dark chocolate chunks because it would add a bit more texture and flavor, and it would also just make it seem more fancy, which, why wouldn't you want it to seem more fancy? So I chopped up a dark chocolate sea salt bar and added that to my batter along with some semi-sweet chocolate chips. As you're mixing, you can look at the batter and see if the ratio of batter to chocolate chip cookies is to your liking, and if it's not, then literally just add more, because you don't want to have a finished cookie and be like, wow, I wish there was more chocolate chips in here, because that is never fun, because you can never go back. Once your dough is formed and looks like this, we're going to spoon the dough out onto a cookie sheet. I do this by scooping up a 1.5 tablespoon-ish sized ball into one spoon and then scraping off of that spoon using another spoon onto the sheet. Again, if I were in a fully stocked kitchen, I would have used parchment paper and put it on the cookie sheet, which would have made this whole last portion of baking much easier. But I don't, so instead I just spread some softened butter onto the bottom of the cookie sheet so they wouldn't stick, which ended up working pretty well. Bake those in a preheated oven for about 11 to 13 minutes until they are fully set. Be careful not to overcook them or undercook them, because undercooked they will be doughy and raw, but overcooked they won't be soft and cakey like you want them. You can check if they're done by sticking a fork into one of the cookies. If the fork comes out clean, then they're ready to be taken out. Once they're out of the oven, allow them to cool for several minutes before you transfer them off of the baking sheet. In my ideal kitchen, I would have moved these to a cooling rack so they could cool more evenly as opposed to my college kitchen replacement, which was a cutting board. After you transfer them, you can try them and taste how delicious they are. The super cool thing about these cookies, though, is that they continue to taste better as they sit. So the next day after you bake these, they will be even better than they were fresh. Thank you so much for watching. Like this video to see more content like this. Make sure that you comment if you make these for Christmas so that Santa can see, and make sure to go to your place first.